Welcome children, I am Dakshayani, handling biology from Bharathidhasanar Matric Higher Secondary School, Arakkonam. Hope you are fine and safe. Today we are going to discuss 12th standard botany, asexual and sexual reproduction in plants. And the topic of discussion today is about the agents of pollination. What do you mean by agents, right? There are two types of pollination children, one is a self and another one is a cross pollination. Self pollination does not need any agents, but cross pollination it needs some agents such as insects, such as animals, some require the birds and some require water, and some plants, some flowers require wind also. So, in this session we are going to discuss about the various agents of pollination. Children, there are two types of pollination, one is a self pollination and the another one is a cross pollination, right? We have discussed about this already. And here self pollination, it does not require any agents, but this cross pollination requires two agents. One is the abiotic and another one is a biotic. What do you mean by abiotic children? Abiotic means non-living. Abiotic, non-living. Biotic means living. Biotic, living. So, what are all the non-living factors children? Wind, water, right, such factors comes under the non-living factors, and living birds, animals and insects such as bats, bees, butterflies, everything comes under the living factors. So, now we are going to see first type, that is a pollination by wind. Pollination by wind we say is as anemophily. What is this children? Anemophily, wind. Anemo refers to the wind. The instrument which is used to measure the rate of wind, we call it as anemometer. So, anemo refers to the wind. So, the pollination by wind we say it as anemophily. And now we are going to see what are all the characteristics of the anemophilous plant. Just imagine children, if it has to be carried by the wind, it should be dry, it should be very light and it should be very minute in size. So, let us discuss what are all the some other characteristics. The plants which pollinate by through the wind is grasses, sugarcane, bamboo, coconut, palm and maize. Mostly all the monocot plants pollinate by, majority of the monocot plants pollinate by means of wind. And now let us see the characteristic features of the anemophilous flower, right? And anemophilous flowers are pendulous. What do you mean pendulous children? Mostly of hanging type. For example, if this is a peduncle, the flowers is of hanging type like this, right? So that it easily floats in wind and the pollen grains are carried away. Pendulous, catkin or spike inflorescence, they usually hang downwards, and the axis of the inflorescence is elongated so that the flower bend downwards and the perianth is absent. In order to expose the floral parts outside, the perianth is reduced or it is mostly absent, and flowers are very small, inconspicuous, colorless, not centered and do not secrete nectar. Since they are carried out by the wind, they no need such attracting factors, because if it has to attract the insect or a bird, it should be very attractive in nature, very colorful and very sweet, right? But here it is, there is no need of such things here. So, anthers produce enormous quantities of pollen grains. Since it has to be carried by the wind, there may be many factors children which prevent, so some pollen grains may be lost. So, the pollen grains are produced in enormous number and they are very minute and dry. And some flowers, they burst violently. What do you mean burst? Vedikirdu, so that it can be carried out easily. And next, stigmas are large. What is a stigma? The female part is very large, so that easily what happens? The pollen grains stick on to the surfaces of the stigma. And the last is that plant produces a flower before the leaves occur, so that the flowers will be in the axillary position, so it can be easily pollinated by the wind. So, these are all the characteristic features of the anemophilous flowers. And now we are going to see the pollination in maize. Maize corn plant, right? And what is the scientific name of this? Z maize. What is the scientific name, children? Z maize, and it is a monoecious plant. What do you mean by monoecious? It is a maize plant. Monoecious in the sense the male flowers and the female flowers are produced by the same plants, right? And the male inflorescence we call it as a tassel. What we call? Tassel, and the female inflorescence we call it as a cob. Cob, and this is a tassel, right? So these are all the two inflorescence, two types of flowers that is present in the maize. And now we can see, children, how the takes place, how the pollination takes place. Here you see, children, the stigma is very feathery, right? If you buy a corn for eating, we can see very feathery substance outside it. That is a stigma. Why it is feathery? Because here it is a self-pollinating plant. So what happens? When the pollen grains mature, due to the force of wind, the pollen grains falls on the female flower, on the stigma. So to receive that, the stigma is feathery. So pollination in maize. And what is the length of the stigma, children? It is 23 centimeter in length, right? It is very long. And now we are going to discuss about the another type. Right, first we discussed about the pollination by wind, and now we are discussing about the pollination by water. Hydro means water. So the pollination by water we call it as hydrophily. Not all the water plants, aquatic plants pollinate by water, children. Some plants such as Arakkonam, water hyacinth, right, and water lily, they pollinate through the wind or by the insect. Except these two plants, majority of the water plants pollinate by water. And based on the place where the pollination takes place, it is classified into two types. One is epihydrophily and another one is hypohydrophily. What do you mean by epi? Upwards. Hypo, downwards. So let us discuss about these two types. First we can see how the epihydrophily takes place. So epihydrophily, here epi means upwards. Here the pollination occurs on the water level. If this is a water, it occurs on the surface. Pollination takes place in the surface of the water. Example, Vallisneria spiralis and Elodia. And now we can see how the epihydrophily takes place in the Vallisneria. This is a Vallisneria plant, children. It is dioecious. What do you mean by dioecious? Separate flowers, right? Different, the male and female flowers are produced by two different plants. This plant produces a female flowers and this produces the male flowers. Now let us see how the pollination takes place. Here the leaf of this Vallisneria is ribbon shaped so that it floats freely in the water, and it is rooted, right? It is a rooted, submerged, right? It is present under the water and it is rooted. Now let us see how the pollination takes place. It is a female flower, children, right? It comes to the surface and makes a depression, right? What do you mean depression? It makes the portions like this. The male flower, the female flower comes on the surface and makes a depression like this. And this is the male inflorescence which produces the what? Pollen grains. After releasing the pollen grains floats on the surfaces, right? And when the pollen grains comes in contact with the stigma, what? It get trapped into the depression, and after pollinating, what happens? The female flower coils like this. The female flower coils and bring it downwards under the water, and later it leads to the development of the fruit. So this is how the pollination takes place in Vallisneria. And now we can see the another type, that is hypohydrophily. Hypo means under water. The pollination takes place under the water. Example, Zostera marina and Keratophyllum. This is Zostera marina, children. Mostly the grass plants, right, which is present under the water, right? It is fully submerged in the water. Here the pollen grains are very needle shaped, and this is the stigma. Stigma, or what we say, children? Stigma are very large in size. Here the pollen grains, the surface tension of the pollen grains, that is the specific gravity of the pollen grains is equal to that of the sea water. So the pollen grains float under the water. The specific gravity of both is same. So now what happens? The stigma, when the male flower releases this pollen grains, the female flower, the stigma, it gets trapped by the stigma and later it leads to the fruit production. So this is how the hypohydrophily takes place in Vallisneria. So I will ask you some question, children. Just answer my question, right? Arvind, just answer my question. What is given example of epihydrophily? Yes, very good. Right, very good. And what we saw? Vallisneria. Given example of hypohydrophily. What is the example? Zoostera. And now we are going to discuss about the biotic agents, children. Biotic means living. We discussed already. The pollination by beetle, we say it as cantherophily. Just underline in your book, children. Cantherophily. And the pollination by moths, phalinophily. Phalinophily. Moth is a small brown color butterfly like insect which sticks into the walls, right? And melitophily as a pollination by bees, and psychophily, it is a pollination by butterflies. And later, and another type is a malacophily. Malacophily is the pollination by snails, and pollination by birds, ornithophily, pollination by bats, crypterophily, pollination by ants, myrmecophily. From this the important one mark questions may ask children. So go through this portion well. It is given in a small box in your book. So first we are going to study about the ornithophily. What is ornithophily? Pollination by birds. Right? Let's just look at this picture, children. Look at these flowers. How very pleasant to look, right? So what are all the names of the flowers? Bombax, Erythrina and Sterlitzia reginae. It is also called bird of paradise flower, right? So these are the flowers which are pollinated by the birds. And what are all the birds? Right, they pollinate, help in pollination. Hummingbird, very small in size, right? Sunbirds and the honey eaters. These are all the birds are very small in size, so that it can move inside the flower and take the nectar. So to attract the insect, to attract the birds, the flowers must be very colorful, children. So now let us see the characteristic features of these ornithophilous flowers. That is the pollination by birds. So characteristic features of the ornithophilous flowers, the flowers must be usually large, right? Then only in small birds can move inside and take the nectar, and it should be tubular, cup shaped and urn shaped. Urn is nothing, the shape like this refers to the urn, right? Urn shape, and it should be brightly colored to attract the birds. And flowers are scentless, but they produce the nectars in large quantities, right? They produce the nectars in more quantities, but they do not produce any smell. That is a scentless. And here they are tough and leathery. Why it should be tough and leathery, children? If you can see, the corolla is very tough because it should withstand the pressure of the birds. For example, if the bird comes inside, it has to withstand the pressure of that. So the corolla, that is a floral parts, are very tough and leathery, right? So with this session comes to an end, children. So far we have discussed about the anemophilous and the hydrophily, right? Pollination by wind, pollination by water, and in the biotic agents we have discussed about the pollination by birds, right? That is ornithophily. Yes, very good. And we have discussed the characteristics of that flowers also. So with this we have attached the study material, assessment and the question bank for this lesson, children. Go through it and write the scientific names and the common names of the pictures of the flowers given in this text in a separate notebook. Thank you, children. Have a nice day.
Nalini Amurtha's father, PKG-லேருந்து 8th standard படிக்கிறாங்க. இப்போ அது 5:30 to 6:30 வந்து கிரவுண்ட் ரன்னிங் ப்ராக்டிஸ் பண்ணிட்டு பாடி எக்ஸசைஸ் பண்ணிட்டு அப்படியே ஸ்கூல் அட்டெண்ட் பண்ணிட்டு மத்தியானம் மேலே மதர் தெரேசா அகாடமிலையும் ப்ராக்டிஸ் பண்ணுறாங்க. மெட்ராஸில் எம்இஎம்லும் ப்ராக்டிஸ் பண்ணுறாங்க. நேஷனல் லெவலில் வந்து கோல்டு அடிச்சிருக்காங்க.